The year is 1692. A cold wind blows through the small village of Salem, Massachusetts. The air is thick with an unsettling tension, a palpable sense of dread that seems to seep into the very bones of the town. But a different kind of chill grips its inhabitants. It's not just the cold that makes them shiver, but an invisible force, a creeping fear that has taken hold of their minds and hearts. Fear, like a contagion, spreads through the narrow streets and into the very hearts of its people. It moves silently, infecting one person after another until the entire village is consumed by it. The devil, they whisper, walks among them, disguised in the faces of their neighbors. Every glance, every whisper, every shadow becomes a potential threat, a sign of the malevolent force they believe is lurking in their midst. This is the story of the Salem Witch Trials, a dark chapter in human history, where superstition and paranoia ignited a fire that consumed innocent lives. It is a tale of hysteria, of a community turned against itself, where reason and justice were overshadowed by fear and suspicion. The Salem Witch Trials stand as a stark reminder of what happens when fear and ignorance grip a community. It shows us the dangerous power of mass hysteria, and how quickly it can spread, turning neighbor against neighbor, friend against friend. What began with a few accusations quickly spiraled out of control, fueled by religious extremism, personal vendettas, and the very real anxieties of a community on the edge of the wilderness. The initial spark of suspicion grew into a raging inferno, consuming everything in its path. Over 200 people were accused of witchcraft, their lives upended, their reputations shattered, families were torn apart, friendships destroyed, and the social fabric of the village was irrevocably damaged. This is their story, a cautionary tale of the perils of fear and the importance of reason and justice in the face of adversity. To understand the events of 1692, we must first journey back to Salem Village, a small farming community struggling to survive on the edge of a vast and unforgiving wilderness. The village was isolated, surrounded by dense forests that seemed to stretch endlessly, creating a sense of both awe and fear among the inhabitants. Life in Salem was harsh. Winters were long and brutal, with snow and ice making travel and communication difficult. The threat of Native American attacks was ever present, keeping the villagers in a constant state of anxiety. These attacks were not just a distant possibility but a real and immediate danger that had claimed lives and homes in the past. Religion provided solace and structure in this unforgiving world. The Puritans' strict religious practices were a source of comfort and community, offering a sense of order amidst the chaos of frontier life. The Puritans, who made up the majority of Salem's inhabitants, clung tightly to their faith, believing that the devil was real and constantly seeking to corrupt their souls. Their sermons often spoke of the devil's temptations and the need for vigilance against sin. They saw themselves as a chosen people, living in a covenant with God, their every action subject to divine scrutiny. This belief reinforced their sense of purpose but also heightened their fear of moral failure and divine retribution. This deeply ingrained fear of the devil, combined with the very real dangers of frontier life, created a fertile ground for suspicion and paranoia to take root. The villagers' fear was not just of external threats but also of internal corruption, leading them to scrutinize their neighbors' behavior for signs of witchcraft or heresy. This atmosphere of fear and suspicion would eventually culminate in the tragic events of the Salem Witch Trials, where accusations of witchcraft led to hysteria and the execution of innocent people. The trials were a dark chapter in American history, reflecting the dangers of mass hysteria and the destructive power of fear. They serve as a reminder of the importance of reason and justice in the face of fear and uncertainty. Today, Salem stands as a testament to the resilience of its people and the lessons learned from its past. The village is transformed from a place of fear and suspicion to a community that embraces its history and strives to educate future generations about the perils of intolerance and the value of understanding. The first whispers of witchcraft began in the winter of 1692, in the home of Reverend Samuel Parris. His daughter Abigail and niece Elizabeth, along with several other young girls, began to exhibit strange and disturbing behavior. They suffered fits, contorted their bodies in unnatural ways, and complained of being bitten and pinched by unseen assailants. Doctors, baffled by the girls' symptoms, could find no medical explanation. Desperate for answers, the community turned to the supernatural. Witchcraft, they concluded, must be the cause. Fueled by fear and fueled by the girls' increasingly dramatic claims, the whispers soon grew into accusations. Under pressure to name their tormentors, the afflicted girls pointed their fingers at three women: Tituba, Reverend Paris's enslaved woman from Barbados, Sarah Good, a beggar known for her sharp tongue, and Sarah Osborne, an elderly woman shunned by the community. These women, already marginalized and vulnerable, became easy scapegoats for the community's growing hysteria. Tituba, facing the threat of violence, confessed to practicing witchcraft and spun fantastical tales of flying through the air with the devil. Her confession, likely coerced, only served to legitimize the girl's claims and ignite the flames of suspicion even brighter. The witch hunt had begun. With accusations flying and fear gripping the community, the authorities established a court of oyer and terminer to investigate the growing crisis. The trials were far from fair or impartial. Spectral evidence based on dreams and visions was admissible in court, making it virtually impossible for the accused to defend themselves. Confessions, often coerced through torture or threats of violence, were seen as the only path to redemption. The accused, facing relentless questioning and the threat of eternal damnation, often implicated others in their desperation to save themselves. Spectral evidence, the cornerstone of the prosecution's case, rested on the belief that witches could send their spirits, or specters, to torment their victims. The afflicted girls, claiming to see the specters of the accused attacking them in their fits, held a terrifying power over the court. Their word, fueled by fear and suggestion, could condemn a person to death. This reliance on spectral evidence, inherently unreliable and impossible to disprove, created a climate of terror where anyone could be accused based on the flimsiest of pretexts. The accused came from all walks of life. They were farmers and housewives, respected community members, and social outcasts. Some, like Rebecca Nurse, were devout Christians known for their piety and good works. Others, like Giles Corey, were outspoken individuals who dared to question the validity of the accusations. The accusers, primarily young women, played a complex and troubling role in the trials. Were they cunning manipulators, basking in the attention their accusations brought? Or were they themselves victims, caught in the throes of a collective delusion, their minds poisoned by fear and suggestion? As the summer of 1692 wore on, the trials reached their tragic climax. The air was thick with fear and suspicion, and the once tight-knit community of Salem found itself torn apart by paranoia and hysteria. 19 men and women, convicted on flimsy evidence and coerced confessions, were hanged on Gallows Hill. These individuals, many of whom were upstanding members of the community, found themselves ensnared in a web of lies and deceit, their only crime being accused of witchcraft. The trials were a grim spectacle, with the accused often having no real chance to defend themselves against the baseless accusations. Others, like Giles Corey, refused to plead guilty or innocent and were pressed to death under a pile of stones, their agonizing deaths a testament to the brutality of the times. Corey's defiance became a symbol of resistance against the madness that had gripped Salem. The hangings cast a long shadow over Salem, silencing the once vocal accusers. The town, once bustling with life, now seemed to be enveloped in a shroud of sorrow and regret. The community, exhausted by the trials and haunted by the specter of innocent lives lost, began to question the validity of the accusations. Families were torn apart, friendships shattered, and the very fabric of society was left in tatters. The realization that so many lives had been unjustly taken weighed heavily on the hearts and minds of the people of Salem, leading to a period of deep reflection and eventual repentance. By the fall of 1692, the tide began to turn. Doubts about the validity of the trials, whispered in private, began to surface publicly. Governor William Phips, initially supportive of the prosecutions, ordered a halt to the trials and appointed a new court, which barred spectral evidence. The remaining accused were released or acquitted. In the aftermath, a sense of collective shame and regret settled over Salem. The trials, once seen as a righteous crusade against the devil, were now recognized for what they truly were: a tragic miscarriage of justice fueled by fear, ignorance, and unchecked power. The Salem Witch Trials left an indelible mark on the village and its people. Families were torn apart, reputations destroyed, and innocent lives lost. The trials serve as a stark reminder of the fragility of justice and the dangers of unchecked power. They also highlight the dark side of human nature, the ease with which fear and paranoia can grip a community, turning neighbor against neighbor, friend against friend. The Salem Witch Trials, though a dark chapter in human history, offer valuable lessons for our own time. They remind us of the importance of critical thinking, due process, and the protection of individual rights. They caution us against the dangers of prejudice, scapegoating, and the abuse of power. Most importantly, they urge us to remember the victims, to learn from the mistakes of the past, and to ensure that such horrors are never repeated. For in the words of philosopher George Santayana, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it.